Hello, beautiful family. Welcome back to our series on meditation. So, in the last video, we covered a bit about why it is that we would even want to meditate, which is really important, in my opinion, before we dive into practicing anything, especially when we enter into this spiritual awakening journey, which in reality, every single person, soul, human is a part of. And it's not that one moment you're asleep and then awake, even though it feels like that. Consciousness is always awake. It knows exactly what it's doing through each of us. And so it may feel like we are starting an awakening journey, but every single soul is on their awakening journey. Even if they are in the depths of density in the matrix, they are still on a spiritual awakening journey. So I just want to start off by saying that. And the reason that we want to know why we meditate, like we went over in the last video, is because if we're going to be practicing something, we want to have an intention rooted behind it. We don't want to be doing it just because an authority or somebody else told us it was the cool thing to do. So if you haven't watched that video yet, please go and watch that, unless you feel a deep connection with your meditation practice already. But I have a feeling that if you're watching this may be something new to you or something that you're really wanting to find a deeper meaning in. So I highly recommend watching that from the beginning and really being able to find your own why. It will keep you grounded, and it will keep you coming back to this space within yourself. If we don't have our why, we don't really have that anchor point. We don't have a true reason to practice something if we don't know why we're doing it. And something that's coming through right now is that it might also be beneficial for you if you have a certain spot in your home that you meditate in as your sacred space. Really putting something in a visual space or in that space, maybe even just I phrased that the wrong way. Maybe finding something like a symbol or a token for you, something from your altar that you can put near your meditation spot that will kind of remind you and anchor you to your why. So something that symbolizes your why. It could even be a piece of art that you do with a word on it that means something to you, that's your anchor. And placing that where you can see that, where you meditate, so that you're always kind of reminded and you have that symbology that really brings you into that space within yourself and reminds you, this is why I'm doing it, this is why I'm showing up for myself. So today what I want to begin with, before we dive even deeper into how to meditate and what it is and what it means and all of this video is really going to be on the misconceptions of meditation and why many people do not stick with it. So let's start out with the misconceptions of meditation. I guess these really go hand in hand. So when I used to be a coach, I heard a lot of my clients tell me that they just couldn't meditate or they didn't like it because their mind was so loud and they couldn't get it to quiet. And it's always bummed me out a little bit because quieting the mind or making our minds completely still and silent is not actually the end goal of meditation. That is a bit of a myth, and it can make us really resist even doing meditation, because if we're expecting our mind to just shut off the second that we close our eyes and go inward, most people would probably not stick with it if they had that expectation. So let me kind of preface this by saying the goal of meditation is not to have no thoughts. It is absolutely not that. That may be a byproduct of your practice, but that is not the goal, and that is not why we do meditation. So, as you guys know, living in our society, we have become very programmed to be overly in our minds. So a lot of times when people say we're out of body, they don't necessarily mean we're up in all these other dimensions. What we talk about a lot in being out of body is about being out of the body, like the vessel, and being more overly in our heads and overanalyzing stories and thoughts. It's like that idea of the monkey mind where it's just racing and there's spirals, and then, as we learned about manifestation and things like this, we can become even more overwhelmed because we start to think, oh my God, what if I'm manifesting all these crazy thoughts? How do I still the mind and focus it in the direction I want to go? So what meditation is it's a tool, and it's a space within ourselves so that we can have a better relationship with our internal world and therefore our external world, because there really is no inside and outside. It's all one, but we perceive it that way because we believe ourselves to be this person with a body and with a mind. So what meditation does for us is not to quiet the mind, not to make it go away, but it's so that we can begin to be aware of the mind, to begin to notice what our awareness, which is what we actually are, is doing with our thoughts. So let's break this down a little bit further. Thoughts are always moving through our minds. It's always happening and it's just functioning. And it can seem, this is a key word, seem, I will be using this a lot. It seems like we are the ones thinking our thoughts, right? But here's the thing. If you are the one choosing to think the thoughts that you think, wouldn't you just always choose to think positively? Would you ever choose to spiral off in negativity at all if it was you choosing to think the thoughts? No, right? So we can feel that this thought process is something that's just occurring. It's conditioning. It's built upon the foundation of the society that we grew up in, the family that we've had, the people that we are surrounded with, the culture. All of these things add to our conditioning of our subconscious mind, and it's offering up specific thoughts depending on what is around you and the different dynamics of relationships that are sparking certain frequencies of certain thoughts, but they're just flowing through. No thought is greater or less than another, but what happens with that thought is how we have a relationship with it, and what happens in our life depends on the relationship we have with our thoughts. So it's not about getting rid of all those. That would be probably pretty challenging. It may be a byproduct, though, going on through your practice. So that is the misconception. We don't want to just go into it thinking, I need to get rid of all my thoughts. Rather, it's bringing awareness to observing that these thoughts are just happening through you. And as you begin to become aware of that, what happens is that we recognize that we must not be those thoughts. And maybe in the past, you had a belief that you were these thoughts, that you were these patterns. So this actually, for me in my personal journey, was the biggest, the absolute biggest awakening moment for me, was recognizing through my own experience of meditation that I am not the thinker of thoughts. That may seem like just a thought right there, right? But to have the experience of acknowledging I must be beyond that is what truly allows us to start merging with our true nature. And that is more of the goal of meditation, is to start noticing, to start realizing that we are that which is beyond. So thoughts can function all day, but it really has nothing to do with us. And so the goal is to not be pulled by our thoughts in all these different directions. What I mean by pulled is that if all these thoughts are rolling through your mind at all times, you, which is awareness, it is the background, it's what's watching, it's the witness of all these thoughts rolling through. If you as awareness, let me define one thing first. Focus is like, let's say, a condensed version of awareness. It's attention. If attention is placed via focus on a thought, you're clinging to it. So if you think of yourself as the sky in meditation, and all of these thoughts are clouds passing through, if you were to cling to one cloud in the mind, clinging to one thought, you're pulling that into your experience. And let's say if you were the sky, that when you did that, it suddenly felt like you were in a storm, because now your focus is wrapped up in just this cloud and you forget that you're the sky. It's the same thing in our minds. We get entangled with a thought by chasing it and focusing on it, and that spirals into the next thought, next thought, next thought, next thought, that we forget, or we get entangled in something that makes it seem like we are those thoughts. But in reality, we are always the sky beyond it, holding and witnessing and watching all of that that's happening. So there's really nothing wrong. There's no fear here. It's okay. You can get tangled in the clouds and thoughts all day. But that's how suffering comes, from honing and clinging and attaching to our thoughts that then begin to create an experience in our external that may seem to be less than favorable. So I just wanted to preface this first video, or this second video, by saying that is a misconception, and we really want to go into meditation knowing that the goal is not to make our minds quiet. The goal is to begin to have a different level of awareness of our thoughts, so that we're not pulled by them, and we can rest as the sky rather than getting entangled in the clouds and making a storm for ourselves. So I hope that makes sense, and we will dive even deeper in the next video. But I'm so glad that you guys are hanging with me, and this is going to be a great series to really start practicing and loving this space within yourself. Much love.